Hello, my name is Jon Witt and welcome to today's class. If you haven't taken class with me before, thanks for checking out my class and my channel. If you're not a subscriber to my YouTube channel, you could subscribe and then you would be notified as far as when I would upload a new video in terms of what I'm teaching. I'm offering obviously these live classes, building upon handstands and more greater mobility. But I offer like teaching tips and more on philosophy and how to practice or how to create a stronger, healthier practice. So if you've been taking this class and you've been benefiting, I'm grateful that you keep continuing and practicing with me. I do teach other classes on Zoom, so if you're interested in those classes, you could go to my website. It's jonwittyoga.com, and then you'd see my information in terms of my classes. And then if you'd like to donate to the class or to my cause, all the information is on my website. So today's class is kind of a combination of what I did last week. So last week I did a wall walk challenge. So the chest to the wall is the exercise, and I really think that's probably one of the best ways to learn a handstand. It's probably the most difficult way. It does require some strength, mobility, but it's a very good way. It's safe as well, because if you can't get all the way back, then you just go as far as you can go. But I'll give you some alternatives as far as how to do it. So last week how I did it was, you started with a low level. We started with 1 and we built upon to 2 and then 3. I believe we went to 5. So 5 is a total of 15 reps, which is quite a lot if you've never done that before. So I had recommended last week that you just do 1, and then we're taking breaks in between, a minute break. And when you work at that type of intensity, it's difficult. Your heart will be racing, and if you're not at that level of fitness, what you could do is you could skip around. And I work with people that are a little bit older in age, and it's something that they could do. You could do this, it's just you'd have to scale it back in order to do that. I don't think age is something that you should maybe make the decision not to do it. It's just if you really want to live more dynamically, it's a good base level, right? A handstand's a very good base level. So what I'll do is I'll give you a good warm-up, and then in terms of warming up, then we'll get into it. And then, like I said, I'll give you alternatives as far as if you could not get all the way up to the wall, I'll give you things that you could actually work with. I have a couple blocks. I have a sandbag. It's an external weight, and that's going to help. I'm not going to do as much middle splits. I'm going to work more on your squat. But when we get into the first one, I'll probably just rest in like a kneeling position, because doing 5, all honesty, you probably need like 2 minutes or 3 minutes to rest. But just to keep the video short and just to kind of keep things moving along, I'm gonna move at 60 seconds, about 60 seconds. So, like I said, if you can keep up, great. It's not so much about completing it, because if you complete it, you might not feel very good tomorrow, or possibly you might get injured. So, kind of know your capacity and practice as you should, right? I'm going to start in an all-4 position. So with my hands underneath my shoulders, I'm just moving the weight laterally, side to side, right? Just understanding where I should be stretching out my hands and my wrists. But in moving side to side, it's a little bit easier, and then it would be more progressive if I turn my hands out to the sides of my mat, and then I'm going beyond the range of motion what you would get in, say, plank and in a handstand. To press up into a handstand really requires a lot of mobility in the wrist. So that's something that I wouldn't obviously start people with, but that's doing the fundamental work of learning a 10-second handstand, a 20-second handstand, a 30-second handstand. Once you could do like 30 seconds, then you could start, I think that's a good starting point if you want to work on pressing into a handstand. So I'm going to come back into the middle, and I'm going to turn the hands back towards the knees, and then that same thing applies as I'm moving the weight back. But if I can, I'm going to move the weight back into the fingertips, so the heels of my hands are peeling up off the floor, and when they peel up, it's just just to create more of a stretching sensation into the knuckles and the fingers. So I'm more predominantly on my left side. So when I really have to work on one hand more than the other, I'm just doing the hands independently. You can do the same. I'm going to bring the hands back where both of my hands are the hard part of my hands now on the floor, and I'm moving the weight back in my knuckles. And if I was holding on to something like a tennis ball or a baseball, something like that, right? There's some tension in my hands, and then that can create more of a stretch through the forearm. So to counter your handstands, this is probably the best. Not that you should only do this, but this is the angle that you probably need the most. If you're doing a lot of push-ups or a lot of yoga, right, pushing exercises, you want the forearms, you want to keep the forearms supple, right? So I'm going to come up into my plank, and when I come up into plank, I'm going to do some scapula push-ups. And just this alone should really help you understand how much to push and how much to stabilize through the shoulder. So it's a really simple exercise. The common mistake that people make is that they do them too quick. Or if you recorded yourself, you would see that just your head's moving. So what you're moving is your scapula. You want to be moving your shoulders, and that's what's going to make, again, the handstand that much stronger for yourself. And it'll eventually lead you to, say you can't do push-ups, it can really help you with your pushing strength in bent arms. So I'm coming up to plank, I'm lifting the knees, and I'm creating this hollowed position. So it kind of looks like I'm rounded. Some would say, oh, your posture's too rounded. It doesn't have to be incredibly rounded. It's just if you didn't really know how to add that type of strength, because it's like more of a hollow body. So I'm going to let my shoulders retract, and then I'm going to push. And then I'm retracting, push, retract, push. You haven't done these ever before, maybe that's your limit, right? But I'm going to push up, retracting back, pushing up, retracting back, and then pushing up. So I'm here now, I'm going to be on my knees, and if you have a yoga strap, you can pull the strap apart or the band apart, and if it's a strap, right, I'm just steady, right? But if I had a band, I'm going to take that band and I'm going to pull it out to the sides, creating like a T shape, right? I'm going to bring it in and pull it apart, bringing it in, pulling it apart, bringing it in, apart, bringing it in, and then apart. And then I'm going to hold that. So if you're relatively new to something like this, a lower repetition is probably what you need. You don't need a high repetition because your warm-up might be too much of a warm-up, and that you don't really have the strength or the energy to do the work. And that really will go more into like your actual practice. So you obviously need to warm up, right? But if you do too much, then you might not have the strength to do the actual handstand, right? That's why I'm mentioning it. I'm going to come up into plank and then go up into a down dog. So I'm up in plank, hollowing out, and then I'm going to pull back up into a down dog, and I'm pedaling the legs out. So I'm moving, heels down. I'm going to come forward and through into an up dog. Lifting, pulling back up into a down dog. Right, coming forward into an up dog, and pulling back up into a down dog. I'm going to come down on my knees, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do more of a body line drill. I'm not going to do it from the side because you'd see it better, but I'm actually, if you have a wall, I'm going to do it at a wall. So what you'll see is that I'm more in a singular line here. But the idea is that when you're face down is that you're getting your ribs away from the floor, and that's really what you're doing when you walk up the wall. You don't want your chest to touch the wall, you actually want the opposite. It's called chest to wall because the chest is facing the wall, not the chest is at the wall, if that makes sense. So if you had the space, you could do it on your mat, right, if you're on a yoga mat. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn around and I'm going to be at this wall, and then my hands are at the wall, and my head is down, and then I'm bringing my feet together. So my feet are together, my lower back is lifting, and my ribs are in. So I'm just kind of informing you what it is that I'm doing, and then I'm going to actually do it with you. So if you needed a visual, you would look at me in terms of the video, right? So I'm going to push through the wall, and then bringing my ribs away from the floor. So it may look like I'm touching the floor, but I'm not. So I'm bringing it in, right, squeezing my bum, pushing the hands into the wall. Right? Take 3 deep breaths. And it's muscle memory, right? It's about getting the body to line up as it should when you're in handstand. And then you can let that go. Then just have your hands underneath your shoulders. So I'm going to come up into a really low cobra. So up into a low cobra. Up into a higher cobra. Lifting myself up. Coming down. Right? Sometimes shorter holds are better than longer holds. So hop, bring yourself up if you can, and lower may be better. I say this often, it's no guarantee in coming up more, it's going to be better. I wish it was that easy, because it would be much easier to teach. Like I taught a class yesterday, and it was good, It's a new class that I've been teaching. And then about 40 minutes or 45 minutes in the class, and people start leaving, So it was probably too difficult for them. So you never really know when you're teaching a group class, right? If it's too easy, people will leave. If it's too difficult, people will leave. When you're in a class, what I would think about is why you're leaving. And if it's a valid reason, right, you gotta go. But if it's more of something that you don't want to do, you should definitely stay. When I teach meditation, people leave. And that's probably the best practice that you need on that given day, right? Just some fun facts for you. I'm going to bring the hands down. I'm going to step back up into a down dog. So pull the hips back in space. Reach through the heels. And then all in consideration, right? If I would, sometimes when I teach handstands in yoga, people leave. Well, rather than leaving, do something that's actually productive to build better practice. So it doesn't have to be a handstand, right? So I'm going to come forward and through into an up dog. Move through your arms. Pull back through your hips. And push through the hands. So we're going to get into the first wall walk or walking up. But I'll give you obviously an option. So it could be plank. You're just holding the plank for the duration that I'm going to do the wall walks. Could be that you're walking up the wall to a certain degree, but then you come down. And be really realistic when you start to feel like, I don't know if I should do this. That's when you should stop, right? And when you have that approach, you could do it tomorrow. You could do it tonight. You could do it later, right? But you can keep building. Like in yoga, if you're a consistent yoga practitioner, you'll notice that, especially if you're a vinyasa practitioner, you're pushing every day. So you can really push every day. You can do that. And the same is with handstands. With any exercise, you could do them every day. If your load was really, really big, right? If you were doing really big lifts and stuff like that, or really strong practice, then you may want to reduce how much you're doing the next day. That would be my advice for you. If I was writing something out for you, I definitely have different scales of practices so that you weren't just burning yourself out. But just come into a squat. So just to come into a squat, just to get a little bit of practice in here, and then I'll get in the handstand. But I'm going to grab a watch just so that I have some time so I can time us in terms of the break. But in squatting, just to give you some feedback as far as what you could do, is you could certainly be in a crouch. Your heels could be up. Say you have a history of herniation in your back, probably better to have the heels up, and they could always be up. It is rare, but some people just can't squat. So So if you've done a lot of jumping in your life, like skateboarding or gymnastics, or you've worn a lot of high heels, probably not going to have your heels flat for a while. So you can put something underneath the heels, you could sit on a block. Right? It should be uncomfortable, but not excruciating. It shouldn't hurt you. And then over time, as you squat more, it can be more of your life, right? You can make it more of a thing that you do in terms of what your hobbies are, like gardening or doing anything on the ground, right? With a young boy or girl or an animal, right? You can get down on the ground. So I'm going to grab a watch. So once you come onto your hands and knees, you want to protract the shoulders. You want the shoulders really strong, and this will be for the handstand. It's going to be the wall walk. So when I walk up, how to get back up the wall is to transfer the weight. So if I bring weight into my right hand, I can move my left hand. Right? If I move weight into my left hand, I can move my right hand. So if you can't move one hand, usually the hand that you can't move when you're in handstand is the hand that's going to give out. So if you always fall to your one side, that's actually not the weak hand. It's the hand that's actually supporting you. So just something that you could think about when you're doing free-handed handstands. So again, here we go. We're going to go up the wall. We're going to try to go for 5. If you've been doing this for a while, if you haven't done this ever, just do 1. Do 1. Build it up where you could get to 10 sets of 1, and then you could start to do multiple ones. That's how I would do it, right? So when I go up, I'm going to walk my feet up. So first I'm in plank. That's how I did it last week. So I'm going to come to a push-up, and maybe you're skipping the push-up, right? But I'm going to walk up. As I walk up, going back, right? Chin into chest. Nothing's touching the wall but the feet. And I'm walking back out. Walking forward. You want to keep pressure in the feet as you come down, back into plank, right? Lower to a push-up. I'm going to do 2. Then go up. That's my second one. Back up. And do 3. And then up. Back down. Feet at the wall. 4. Back up. And honestly, the more my arms are straight, the easier it is. The push-ups are the hard part. Walking forward, stepping back, coming down, and then just come to your knees if you couldn't hold this, right? Hold a static position. I'm going to do 5 here. Back up, push. Ribs in. Back out. And come down, and you can come into a squat, or you can sit on a block. So in sitting on a block, right, I'm up on a higher level. You could stand, like let's again say your heart's really going very quick, right? And the harder my heart is pumping, the longer I would take a break. So just like I mentioned about the video, is that all honesty, you probably need like 3 or even 5 minutes of a break to do something like this. But if I just think of like a public or a group class like yoga, right? It's always got to be flowing, right? Everybody for the most part, it's a flowing type of experience. So you're never really going that far into like a handstand practice to really develop it. The classes that I've been in or the classes that I've taught, I usually divide them where it's like I'm doing a handstand like in the beginning, doing it like in the middle, and maybe doing it towards the end. But towards the end, people are already pretty tired from moving in and up from these positions, and that's rightfully so because you're doing so much. But you're like tipping to getting to that point of being able to balance, but it's really not enough concentrated work in my opinion. I mean, some people do develop a handstand in yoga, but I would have more of a dedicated practice towards it. Still do your vinyasa classes or do your workouts, whatever you do, but you could have separate handstand practices. And as I mentioned before, it's just like 10 minutes or 20 minutes that you could do it, and then you're done. But you're going to get closer and closer by doing it that way as opposed to doing it as I mentioned before. How you can scale this back, because we did the bulk of it and you might just be tired. In rock climbing, they call it pumped out, right? When you're climbing really hard, your arms get really pumped out and you get tired, and then that's, you can't climb anymore. So the same could be here. You might be just physically just tight. So you could do the wrist work, you could stretch out your shoulders, there's a lot of different things you could do. But rather than just going like 4, 3, 2, 1, that's like the hard way of doing it. This ladder or this pyramid is you could go 3, then 1, something like that, or 3, 2, 1. On a day that you're just tired, right? Do the bulk of it, but then do like 1 or 2 reps, right? And that's how you could build up to 20. So you want to build this up to doing it, because we did it last week 15 times. So you want to do it 20 times or 30 times. You probably need more singular reps to get that high. I've never done that many in a row, but that's how you could do it if you really wanted to do it. So we'll get into the second set. I'm going to come and do 3, and then I'll do 1, right? Like if I knew exactly what your strength level was, it would be scaled specifically for what your level is. But like anybody can learn this. It's just you got to find the right starting point and how to layer it, right? So I'm coming into my plank. My hands are turned out. Like I said, you can walk up partially. You don't have to walk up the whole way. This is a position I use this often. So I'm on the tops of my feet, and then I'm pushing, right? And you could hold it however long I'm doing it, then you come out. The push-ups you don't have to do. They could be negatives. You can slowly go down. So there's always ways to make it easier, and there's always ways to make it more progressive, right? So I'm turning the hands out. My feet are at the wall. So I'm coming down for 1, and up, and then walking back. Push. Bring your chin into your chest. Ribs away from the wall. Walk it out. We'll do a push-up here. Up. Legs together, ribs in. And I'm doing them a little bit slower, working more on the technique of it. So feet at the wall, coming down to be the last one. So 1 push-up, slow, 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 and up. And walking back up. Push. Ribs in. Back out. Down, walk forward, and squatting. So the sandbag is a really, really great way to counter the weight. So if you can't get the heels down, like I said, it's always an option. It's not necessarily bad. But if you'd like to get the heels down and you keep tipping back in space, the sandbag holds as like a counter. So when I'm here, I can bring weight into the heels, I can push my knees apart, I can push my knees in. And, you know, what I would do is, and I probably said this before, is just time yourself. So whatever time you're like, I need to come out of this, that's a good time. That could be 10 seconds, that could be 20 seconds, it could be 30 seconds. But do it multiple times throughout the day. Like do it, I always suggest this to people, is do this type of practice before you eat. Because the more compact positions are, you know, there is the potential that you would, you know, throw up your food or throw up your water, and this is the big reason why you don't eat before you train or do yoga, you know, for that specific reason. But I'm moving the weight around side to side, very good for the feet, you know, it could be a circular motion, right? And then when you learn how to transfer the weight, you'll be able to squat much longer than your typical time, right? And then, you know, I've been squatting for a long, long time. You know, I could easily squat for 30 minutes, an hour if I really want to. Not that I suggest that, but as you practice more, you'll be able to squat. And it's good to have, you know. You don't always have ground to sit on. You know, in the East, this is a resting position. It's a really resting position, but initially, your legs will burn, it'll hurt, right? It's difficult to hold this as long as we're holding it. So I'm going to do the last one, and like I said, if you can't do it, you could just do plank again, and it's all building up. You got good practice, like good practice where you're not hurting yourself. You'll keep getting stronger, but you have to make it more progressive. That's the thing that people don't do, is that they always kind of keep it the same, or they keep it really intense and then they do too much and they don't do enough recovery, right? There's a number of reasons why people don't continue to grow as a practitioner, or they get hurt. When people get hurt is because they keep doing the same thing. What works won't always work. You'll have to change it. And as you change it, then you'll have multiple ways of practice. If you always do the same practice, there's a greater potential that you will hurt yourself if it's progressive like modern yoga, right? Not that I'm guaranteeing that's the least thing that I want for anyone, is to ever get hurt. But you want to change things, right? So I'm going to go up, and I've said this before with straight arm pushing. I've never hurt my shoulder, I've never hurt my wrist in these types of positions. You're more potentially going to hurt your wrist or your shoulders by doing repetitive low push-ups, right? If you do them too much or poorly, right? Or too much of the same pattern, like I said, right? So I'm going to do just one push-up, and then I'll go up just one time, and then I'll hold it for about 5 breaths. So I'm up at the wall with my feet, my hands are turned out, creating a really good hollowed position. I'm lowering, staying straight up, and go up. My hands are turned out, right? My glutes, I'm trying to engage my glutes, and my ribs are in. Take 3 more breaths. And press through the hands. Shift the weight. Walk it out. And as you walk out, press into the wall. Right, that's nails in my wall here, so I want to cut up my feet. That's why I don't steadily walk down, but you should, if you can, make the proper steps to sit down. So let's say squatting's not good. Here's a good option. I did this last week. Is you could just go up against the wall, and your knees are wide. You could use weights. I like hands. Not that I'm totally opposed to weights. You could use weights, right? But I'm resisting the pressure of my hands. And as I lift my legs up into my hands, it's creating strength in the inner thigh, but it's actually creating more, because there's a steady pressure, right? What's coming up will allow my legs to come down. And the better this position is, the easier it'll be to squat. I mean, that's a big part of it. Ankle mobility is a big part of it. Spine mobility is a really big part of it as well. I'm not doing so much of the spine today, but at some point I'll show you how to do that. But when I'm pushing my legs apart, right, it's increasing more space, which again will allow you to sit. But I want to show you another way of squatting. Is I'm going to be on an elevated surface. I'm not really high, but you could certainly be on a higher surface just for the sake of the video so you can see it. Is I'm going to be standing on blocks. So my feet are on blocks. I'm going to use the weight again. And this is for your spine. So if you're doing it, this variation, it's very good in getting into your back and your spine. So my feet are up on the blocks, and then I'm grabbing the weight. This isn't really a lot of weight. It's probably about 6, maybe 8 pounds. I'd start with like this type of weight, and then as I'm here, I'm letting my arms descend and my head is down, right? I start with this weight, and then as it gets easier and you consistently do it, it could be more. For me, I haven't really used more than, say, for this particular exercise, I haven't used more than like say 15, 20 pounds. I'm not a big person. I'm quite flexible in a lot of ways. So the more flexible you are, the less weight you need, you know? But this will really change the way that you fold forward. It's a big part of it. Like, think of the last position that I was at the wall. If I was trying to get my head to my feet, it's the spine, how the pelvis, how the torso moves in between the legs is really what it is. So take 5 deep breaths here. Push the knees apart. And your back is rounded as if it was in plow position. So and again, a shorter hold is what you could use. So if you do use a shorter hold, chop it up into 3 parts: morning, afternoon, and evening. As it gets easier, it could be multiple times during the day, and that's you're really working on a position. Like I'm working on some new transitions. I'll do them throughout the day when I have the time. So I'll do a short warm up, and then I'll do my transitions that I'm working on right now. So I'm gonna come off the blocks, and then as I come off, I'm just gonna have my legs just stretched out in front of me. Just some counter stretching, just to kind of wrap things up. So my legs are forward. I'm gonna contract my thighs. I'm gonna relax them. I'm going to contract, I'm going to relax, contract, and then I'm going to relax. I'm going to have my knees bent, my hands are turned out, pulling the shoulders back in space. I'm going to lift the hips up off the floor. So as I lift the hips up, think of the shoulders are moving apart, even though we're moving them back in space. And then I'm going to move the weight around in my hands, adjust my hands, my wrists. The higher my hips are, the more it's going to adjust the upper back, right? Is what you're trying to go for. But if I'm moving the weight forward, it's going to adjust my shoulders. Say I bring my knees way forward, right? That's really heavy on the shoulders, very heavy on the legs. There's no wrong way of doing it. It's just, how much can your body take? And it's not that you're just trying to, obviously you don't want to hurt it, right? But my hands are down. I'm going to lift my hips up and take my hips forward toward my feet. And if you immediately feel some negative pressure in the elbows, I wouldn't play around with that. I just move my hips back, and then you're here. And this is this is still very progressive in my shoulders. I did a lot of pushing yesterday, so this feels great. And then it'll help with overhead positions like handstand and wheel, right? But as time goes on, you could either move it back, make it easy. As time goes on, you can bring it forward again. All right, and this could be the sequence of things. So you can think of like if you're really going progressive, do it for 5-10 seconds, and then pull it back, right? You don't want to live too long in one position initially, because you could really overdo it. You know, what you're doing is you're manipulating obviously the soft tissues, but you could overwhelm the connective tissues, and that's where things get a little scary, or not scary, but you could obviously damage the tissues where they're not going to be the same again. All right, so just sit cross-legged, and as you're sitting cross-legged, just take your right hand to the right, bring your left hand to the left, just move off the side. Now I'm bringing my weight into my right elbow, so my right elbow's down. Right, just then work a lot on this part of the outer half of the hip. It's good to work on. And you can bring yourself up, and then I'm reaching out through the left side. I'm finding the right angle. Obviously, what you're doing isn't just about stretching, but it partially is. You want to find what needs to be manipulated. And let's say you're good in positions. You maybe not need them as much, but you probably still need them to some degree, right? And then you can bring yourself up into a seated position. All right. So I hope that class was good for you. Again, it's layered, and hopefully you're finding the right starting point, and that's how I could help you. If we were to work personally together, is that we could work and communicate and where to start and how to make it and layer it. And there's ways, like I said, to make it more progressive or to pull it back, right? And that's what you want from any trainer that you're working with or any yoga teacher, right? In working on that type of level, it's really about communication. So you got to communicate with your doctors, you got to communicate with your trainers, right? You have to have an open line of communication, and then it could be a healthy relationship, But you got to voice what's not working. So when you're taking classes, right, tell the people what you want, right? And they'll give you that, right? But they'll also give you things that are actually beneficial, like maybe working on things that they think would be progressive enough to really help you in practice. All right, so hopefully I'll see you soon in class. You can like, subscribe. You can let me know how the classes are going. You can send me a video, and I can help you in any way if I saw actually what's happening. If you wrote about it, great detail, that's one thing. If I see it, I could tell you more specifically how to make your practice better. All right, take care of yourselves.